Hello, everybody. Welcome back. So now we're talking about training. In the Dessler book, this is the next chapter. It's chapter 6 is training. However, in the American Management Association, it is, I don't know if you can see this, it's pretty bright here, but it's chapter 9. You should be able to see that. Training and development. So yeah, jumping forward in the American Management Association book, but following the Dessler text. So training. Training is, of course, one of these big 5 elements of staffing, right? We originally said that HR is just like management because it's HRM, and management is planning, organizing, leading, controlling, and with HR we add staffing. And then staffing, that one thing, includes 8 separate categories. There's sort of the central 5, which are recruiting, selecting, training, compensating, and evaluating. And then there's the additional 3, which are health and safety, fairness, and unions. So, okay, so these are our 8, and now we've already covered the first 2, recruitment and selection. Now we're on the third one, which is training. So typically we'll start with our presentation. We'll do that during class, then we'll do the Carter Cleaning Company. Then we'll discuss, we'll have a discussion, but what we're going to be talking about really is the idea of what is an orientation. Oh, I can't go backwards. Oh, I can't go backwards. I forgot. Well, what's an orientation? What's the purpose of it? Orientation is what happens when you get a new employee who comes into the job. We also call this onboarding. We also call this socialization. So, those are all words you're going to need to know. Onboarding, like getting on board, or socialization, becoming part of the society of the organization. But we also call it orientation. There are 4 big reasons that we want to do an orientation. So one is just to make people feel welcome. I have had jobs with good orientations. I have had jobs with bad orientations. And it's a tremendous difference when you come in and there's some sort of, whether it's a speech or a lecture, sometimes organizations do it on video. They'll have you log on to their website and there are different video presentations from their CEO, or I'm going to get something to cover the keyboard. Maybe there are presentations from the CEO, presentations from the vice president or the head of HR or whatever. Those are all important presentations and you can watch them on video. It doesn't need to be face-to-face or in person, certainly these days. But you want to make sure people feel welcome. And for that reason, it's also very useful to have people orient with their teams, their groups, their departments, have lunch together, have a meal, something. Second is about basic information. And when I say basic information, I mean the rules, the policies, the procedures. And I think we talk a little more, maybe we talk later in this class about the difference between what is a rule, a policy, and a procedure. But those are all quite important. So, a rule is just something you have to follow. For example, the rule is every man has to wear a tie. That's it. That's the rule. Now, what happens if someone breaks that rule? Maybe you have a very clear punishment, and that's it. It's what it is. Then there's a policy. Like we have a policy of no eating at work. And now that's not a rule exactly. It's more of a guideline. It's a policy. Generally, no eating at work. Does that mean you can't have gum? Does that mean you can't have a snack, or does that just mean you can't have a meal? What does it mean exactly? What if somebody's diabetic and they need food? It's just a general policy. And then there are procedures. So rules have a definite result or outcome. If you break the rule, this happens always. A policy is more of a guideline. If you break the policy, then the boss or manager has some discretion to decide what they will do. And a procedure is a set of steps. So for example, if I'm teaching in a classroom and some students start fighting each other in the class, well, we don't have a rule. There's no rule that says if students fight, then this happens. There's no real policy. Of course, there's a no fighting policy, But the procedure would probably be, well, contact E-Ling, and E-Ling will contact the campus security or the police, and they will come, and there's a whole many multi-step procedure, right? Just like if there's a case of sexual harassment at work. It's not just a rule, because we need to find evidence. We need to know who's guilty or innocent. There's a whole set of steps that must be followed. So that's a procedure. Rules, policies, procedures. We need to give this kind of basic information to the employees. Also, information about their benefits, information about any sort of healthcare policies we have about insurance, sick days, holidays, time you should come to work. I mean, I once had a job at a Chinese TV station where on the first day I showed up and I didn't even know where I was sitting. Nobody said anything to me. I had to ask someone like, where do I have a desk? And then nobody talked to me the whole day. I had to ask someone, what time should I be coming to work? And it was crazy. It was like absolutely crazy. But that really was that was their sort of business. They didn't orient. And of course, the business ended up going bankrupt after a while because nobody cared, So that gets to number 3. Like when I say nobody cared, you have to help the employee understand in a very broad, big picture, what is this organization about? What's the history of it? Who started it? When did it start? Why did it start? What does it do? Just part of orientation is to be able to see the forest. Especially in a big company, you might be hired to work in advertising, department of Kellogg's or Lego or Fisher-Price or whatever, a big Wall Street firm like Lehman Brothers or something. You're hired to work in a small part of a big business, but you want to explain to the employee, what does this big business do? How did they start? What do they do now? What is their plan? Sort of their past, present, and future for the business. And then number 4 is really starting to understand the culture of the company. And when we say culture, we mean how do they do things here? Do men wear ties? Do people speak quietly? Is everybody aggressive? Is everybody very calm? Is it a culture of diversity? Is it, just what's the culture? That's super important. All good companies have a pretty strong culture, which we don't talk about culture much in this class. That's more of an organizational behavior topic. But you really have to orient the employees to your culture. That's quite important. So you'd have like a process where the manager would probably have a checklist where, they just make it easy. The manager just goes down the list. Did we do this? Did we explain to the employee? Did we explain to them like the policy or the job description or the performance evaluation? Did we explain whatever, annual tuberculosis, TB screening, which is a kind of disease that we need to screen for? Did we explain safety information? Did we explain, whatever, supplies? Just, and what date was it reviewed? And, so it makes it easy to do it that way. It's important to give employees some kind of handbook. Most big companies will have an employee handbook. CIP has one, Donghua has one, an employee handbook. And they're all, as I said, modern businesses might use videos or different levels of technology where you come in and you get a computer and it's preloaded. You might have a shared drive that has just, they say, take a day, explore the building, go through the shared drive, watch all the videos, and then we're going to meet together at 4:30 for 30 minutes, then we'll all grab some drinks after work. Like, that's fine, that's good. IBM uses Second Life, which is a virtual environment. You can get on the computer and you can sort of walk around the building and the grounds and the campus, and it's all virtual, which is cool. That's a way to do it too. But an important part of this is driving engagement, which is one of these key critical outcomes that we talk about in HR. Remember, we had talked about things like employee citizenship, employee productivity, efficiency, satisfaction, effectiveness. And another one of these big outcomes is engagement. And to be engaged is to be very much a part of, like wholeheartedly a part of a business. Not just doing it because you need the money or doing it because you need the benefits, but doing it because you truly care about it. Now, orientation has a huge impact on how employees enter the company. And again, we consider all of this in HR to be part of training. So this element of training people right when they come in has a huge impact on the company. So for example, what Toyota does, they have a 4-day training. So the first day is just welcoming people, talking about the culture of Toyota, their Six Sigma, an overview of their structure. Day 2 involves talking about some of their values, communication, respect, teamwork. Day 3 involves feedback training, understanding how you're going to work with your manager, your division boss, and what kind of feedback you're going to get. And then day 4 is teamwork training. So you get a lot of understanding right at the beginning of how Toyota does work and how they want to do work. And that can really drive their engagement for their employees. So, the question for us and for a lot of people in China, because training honestly is a very new thing. I know lots of people who do training, both Chinese and foreigners. And it's really interesting actually to see how it's done. Most of the Chinese trainers I know, they work for training companies. And the company will give them an assignment, and they'll go to the company and deliver the assignment, and that's it. And most of the Western trainers I know are much more focused on finding out what the company needs or company wants, and then tailor creating a sort of bespoke training for them. In smaller companies, training isn't really done very much. It's a really new thing in China to have trainers, and so there's lots of money in this. I have friends who, I know some Chinese people who've just started training organizations to try to use Western either HR ideas or group dynamics or theater or communication or whatever, and they are just making, incredible money, honestly, because every single company recognize, or not every single, most companies are recognizing in China the importance of training, and they're putting a budget together for that, and they have the money, but there just aren't that many trainers, to be honest. So what kind of training would you guys like? We can talk about that in class. What would help you theoretically? Not saying I'm delivering that, but just to discuss it. What kind of training would help you in your life? If you could get training in anything right now. So this is a question that no one ever asked me when I was in university. But looking back now, there were definitely things I wish I knew more about. Such as, not so much job hunting, like what websites to use, but what kind of job do I want to get and how should I figure that out? How does one learn what job is right for you? Like that is something I would have liked to be trained on in university. Or certain financial things. How do you calculate taxes? How do you deal with debt? How do you pay back student loans? I mean, these are things I would have liked more training on. Some of the stuff I've since learned about the stock market, I would have liked some training. Like these are all things that I felt would have helped me. When we talk about training after onboarding, we're talking about this continual process of increasing people's skills, right? So it's methods, it's processes, and we give people new skills, new knowledge. And generally, it's for the purpose of performing their jobs. It doesn't have to be. You could give your employees training on stress management. You could give them training on music, on painting, on whatever, if you think that it's going to be beneficial for them to make them happier or whatever, that also could benefit their effectiveness. Right? So we want to influence how effective these employees are. And if they're happier, they might work harder. Training influences effectiveness more than appraisal, but slightly less than goal setting. Goals are extremely important. The feeling of setting a goal, achieving a goal, setting a goal, achieving a goal, really can't be replaced with anything. I wish I had that training in university too. Very, very powerful goal setting. Something I think everybody could use more of. But training is very valuable. So when we talk about modern training, we're talking mostly about using technology, right? Online training, computer training. We're talking about understanding the relationship between learning and performance. Where in the past, I mean, 50, 40, 30 years ago, a lot of training was very specifically, oh man, I jumped again. A lot of training was tailored to the job. So if you're in the Carter Cleaning Company, they would train you in cleaning. That's it. If you work in finance, they would train you in finance. If you work in advertising, you'd have training in advertising, and that's it. Where now there's a greater understanding in the modern world that if I work in advertising, maybe some training in time management would be very useful. If I work in advertising, maybe some training in childcare would be useful. There's all kinds of learning that could make me a better and more effective employee, and also just an employee who's grateful to this organization for providing this kind of training. So, and generally, this also goes to that third idea on the previous slide of a broad focus, where training in the past was very narrow. How do you use this machine? How do you use this software? How do you use this technology? And that's it. Every day you use this machine, we'll train you on that. Every day you use this Excel software, we'll train you on that. That's it. But now there's this recognition that what if you work with accounting and you work with Excel? We could still train you on Photoshop, because maybe you're going to have some great ideas or you'll love it, and then in the future you could move into marketing and you could help our company. There are a lot of benefits to training a very broad focus rather than a narrow focus. So that's more modern. Other modern trends is that in the past, training was to learn a very specific skill. Like I said, to learn a particular machine, technology, or software, or a skill like leadership or management or evaluation skills. We had any sort of specific training where there was no real proof that the training worked. The companies would bring in a trainer, the trainer would deliver their information, and then the employees would benefit or not. But now in the modern world, and this is something we'll discuss in this topic, companies expect a return on investment, a very real, measurable dollar amount that they get from the training. Now, of course, they don't get cash. What they get is savings because employees are working more effectively. But if you can't measure that, it's unlikely that you'll get jobs doing training or be effective in HR. There's an expectation of more cultural and diversity training, where it's not about learning a particular machine or a particular skill. It's about learning policies and ways of thinking and changing and broadening your mind. There's more training on a shorter time frame. So in the past, training might have lasted days and days, and now training might last 2 hours because these businesses, they're a little more focused on this just-in-time mentality. There's a higher focus on meaningful training, training in ways that will improve your life. Relaxation, calming, breathing exercises, yoga, time management, work-life balance, all of these things that are not at all related to the actual job skills, but are related to having a more meaningful life. More technology training than in the past, and different categories of training that didn't exist before. For example, training in spirituality and being connected to what you love and finding your passions. I mean, all of those kind of trainings could definitely make your employees happier, give them more loyalty to your company, but they're not things that were done in the past. Other trends in the private sector, there's more partnerships with information technology. There's more diversity in the public sector. There's more systematic thinking and succession planning. For senior managers, there's more training about employee commitment and engagement and citizenship, work-life balance. For researching, there's more training about culture. For HR, there's more training about global practices and cultural practices. And for teachers and educators, it's more about making partnerships between educational institutions rather than just teaching your class. So, in the past, you might, as a teacher, have a training on classroom management, or you might have a training on how to use digital online resources to learn more about your subject, like history or anthropology, where now it's more like, how do you work with other institutions? Because the world is getting smaller and people need to partner with each other. There's lots of types of training. Training is not just how to do a skill, certainly not anymore. It could be basic skills, filing, software, Excel, training in security, all kinds of training. Then there's executive training, that's always existed for senior managers. There could be quality training, competition, communication, sales, just all of these different skills, safety. These are all different types of training that could exist. We'll talk about this a little more in class. The costs we expect about, for a big company, 2% of payroll. Total training expenses generally in larger companies come to about $700 per employee per year. And this is interesting, in large companies, we expect almost 80% of employees to be trained, and in a year, the average number of hours is almost 24 hours. So we're talking about a lot of time, but what's more important is almost everybody gets trained. Where in the past, you really didn't get training unless you were senior management. The lower level managers, you were just expected to do your job, and frontline employees were getting no training whatsoever, certainly not in anything that didn't relate to their daily job. Okay, we'll train you in how to use this machine, but that's it, now you're done until you're a senior manager. And then we'll give you leadership training or management training or an MBA or something. Now we're looking at training 80% of people. So training has become a huge, huge benefit. And studies have shown that companies that provide better training to employees tend to have more employee loyalty. So how would you like to be trained? Not what, but how. Would you want to be trained face-to-face? Would you want to be trained on a computer? Would you want to be trained in a classroom? This is the training format. So more organizations are offering technology-driven or online or virtual trainings, but the lion's share of trainings, most trainings, are still done in person, face-to-face. At this point, there's really still no substitute for that. And the benefits of training. So we've talked about this a little bit already. You have improvements in loyalty. You have improvements in satisfaction, both for employees and for customers. You have improvements in almost all of our metrics: productivity, performance, profitability, quality, sales, and loyalty, right? So retaining people. I mean, just across the board, every single thing we can measure in HR. Sorry, it's very sunny in my apartment, which is a good thing, but a little bit invasive. So every metric that we have that you can measure in HR benefits from training. And again, when I say training, I don't mean how to use this machine or how to use this software. I mean anything that teaches you new knowledge and new skills. Like I said, it really could be learning about childcare, child psychology, or learning about I'll give you an example. When I was in law school, I took a law class in France. I studied law in France for one summer, and which was very interesting. And one of our courses was a training about wine. And they brought in this sommelier he was the dean of the Sommelier University. Sommelier is the French job of who picks which wine will pair with which food at a restaurant. And we tried all these wines, and they explained to us, when you get a job doing law in France, often part of the training will be a training on wines, because you're expected as a lawyer to take customers to dinner. And in France, if you can't find a good wine that pairs well with the food, then you're not high class. And the good customers know. The good, profitable Clients know that they want their lawyer to be able to do this. It has nothing at all to do with the law, but it was one of the best classes I've ever taken, of course, because all we did was drink this wonderful French wine and champagne. It was amazing. And that training, I can totally understand how that would improve loyalty and make the employee more satisfied, which leads to the customer being more satisfied, increasing in productivity and quality and sales and loyalty and just all of these things from something that had nothing to do with using a particular software or machine or technique or anything like that. So lots of benefits of training. Now, where do we fit in as part of HR in this? We get that training is very important, but we in HR are not usually doing the training. Sometimes we are, but not usually. So HR deals with making sure the training is strong, making sure that it is not super expensive, and making sure we're following the trends of what training is good. So we want to use our internal resources. This has to do with, we talked about this whole job analysis and the job description, the job specification. We talked about having succession plans. We talked about having a plan both for every job and for every person. So for every job in our organization, we want to know what skills are required, what's the job analysis, and what kind of person do we want. And maybe we have some choices of, if this job is open, who do we think could move into this position? What training do they need? Are they ready? But then we also have our little files on every employee. Some employees might be wonderful. Maybe we have an employee who went to sommelier school and knows about wine. Maybe we have an employee who's a professional at childcare. Maybe we have an employee who's a talented musician. Whatever we want to know, our internal resources. What kind of people do we have who could give trainings? That's very important. We want to make sure in HR that the training is aligned with the goals. And you should remember this idea. When something is aligned with the goals, what we call this is strategy. When we say the word strategy, we mean that something we're doing is aligned, is matching, is parallel to the goals. We want to be able to develop skills or values that employees can use. So we're looking for training programs that are useful. We're keeping in very close contact with management about what kind of training they need. And we're surveying the employees on what kind of training they actually do want. What do they feel they need and what do they feel they want? Now, one of the things that's important for us in HR is to understand that we're moving in the modern world away from training on specific machines and tools and skills. It's not just training someone on Excel. It's training people on knowledge. So we'll talk in class, what is knowledge, but what we're talking here is knowledge management, KM. And this is a process where knowledge moves through an organization. So what does this mean? Well, imagine that we give a training to the vice president, and we give the vice president training on motivation. How do you motivate people? So that's the vice president. Does that flow downwards to you who just got this job in the company 6 months ago and you work in advertising? How is this knowledge transferred, right? This is the flow of knowledge, or the transfer of knowledge from someone high to someone low, or from someone low to someone high. How does knowledge move through organizations? Because we also, in training for HR, we have to decide who we're going to train. We can't train everybody about everything. But we want to make sure that we are flexible and that knowledge can move. Now, there are two kinds of movement. There's tacit and explicit. Tacit knowledge is knowledge that you learned by doing the job. It's not in an employee handbook. So let's say that I come to work every day and I know, I'm a teacher, and I know that on Monday morning, the students are less happy. They don't remember the stuff they did this weekend. They don't, if I can't be very serious with them. I need to be more friendly and playful. That's a Monday morning class. Wednesday classes are different. Now, is that going to be in my employee handbook? that says when teachers go to school on Monday, students are less likely to respond. No, that would never be here. Is that important knowledge? Yes, it is important knowledge. This kind of knowledge is usually shared verbally. So if we get a new teacher and they say, welcome, here's Simon, here's Vance, here's David. Hey guys, you want to talk to this new teacher, give them some training. We're going to have some tacit knowledge to give them. Some knowledge that we've learned on the job. I would say, hey, on Monday, just so you know, it's my experience that, what. Or if you talk to a difficult customer, then I could tell my manager, hey, just so you know, this customer was being a little bit difficult, Then there's explicit knowledge. Explicit knowledge is written. That's where you would find that in the employee handbook. Like, our healthcare policy is this. The copay for the insurance is this. You get this many sick days per year. I mean, that's explicit. So this knowledge is shared differently. We need to understand this because in training, we're giving people new knowledge. So when we give people this new knowledge, how is that flowing through the organization? Is it flowing through because it's being written and given out to people? Or is it flowing through in a more tacit way where people are telling each other, but it's not necessarily being written down? That's important to us. Okay, so now we're going to discuss this idea, these 5 steps, which you definitely need to know for the final exam. So we'll talk about this example, and the example is you're hired to run as the manager of a Chinese real estate company. They want training, but they just don't, they want training, but they don't know anything really about it. Who should be trained? How should they be trained? What should they be trained? How do we know if it was good? And so you need to do this from the start to the finish. You need to be able to analyze the training. And that's kind of what we're doing for the rest of this lecture. So we start with being able to design training. Now, sometimes you're definitely going to hire an outside trainer, but you want to make sure that the training is being designed well. And we use something called an ADDIE process. This was used after World War II. ADDIE stands for Analysis, Design, Develop, Implement, Evaluate, ADDIE. And the ADDIE process is this 5-step process of creating a training. Now, we are online, but I still will give you as the homework after this class that for this particular week, I'm going to ask everybody to create a training that you personally could actually do using this ADDIE process. Like I said, I have seen people make a lot of money and make wonderful connections through training. It's not just about the money in Shanghai right now. So, for example, one of my friends, and you can totally do this, he goes to the Chamber of Commerce. And if you don't know, the Chamber of Commerce is a group of companies or businesses, and it's usually done by country. There's the American Chamber of Commerce, there's the Canadian Chamber of Commerce, there's the German Chamber of Commerce. And what they do is they have lunches, and they do it in different ways. Some of them have coffee meetings or drinks or whatever, but they have meetings where representatives from lots and lots of businesses come, and usually they do it by category. So they might have a food and beverage lunch where a lot of restaurant owners come or food services owners come. They might have a real estate day. They might have a financial services day. So they have these different days for different industries. And then for the American Chamber of Commerce, you'd have a lot of American businesses would come. And they invite people to come and just meet each other. It's just to mingle and shake hands and, well, not anymore, bump fists and meet each other. I'm sure these days, oh, you're in China. Anybody in China, you're fine. But they have these Chamber of Commerces everywhere. And what people do is you can develop a training and go there, get some business cards, and go and say, this is how I train people. I do a training in wine. I'm French, and my family does wine tastings, and I do a training in wine, and here's why I do it. I'd love to sit down and talk with you about my training. And, so it's not just about making money, although you can make a lot. Most trainings will charge for an afternoon, and this is only if you're experienced. But if you're experienced, you can charge 20,000 RMB per day for a training. At the beginning, you're more likely to charge 5,000 to 6,000 RMB for a 3 to 5 hour training. But that's still, that's good money for an afternoon. If you're charging 5,000 RMB, you're making $800 for 3 hours or something. That's a lot of money. And that's the very, very low end. And of course, I'm talking Shanghai prices because that's what I'm familiar with. I don't know what you would charge in London or something. But in Shanghai, those are about the prices. A lot of trainings are also sold in packages where you would sell 3 trainings, like one this month, one in 2 months, and another, in 2 months or something like that. But what I want you to do is develop a training. It could be just cultural. If you're from whatever, Lebanon, and you want to talk about Lebanese culture for a company that might want to do business with the Middle East, or you're from, Iran, or you're from Venezuela, or you're from Canada, and you want to talk about culture, that's fine too. Just some sort of training. So first is analysis, and we haven't learned a needs analysis yet. We'll learn that in like 5 minutes. But you'll use a needs analysis to identify the KSAs that are needed. Not KSAP, because you're not training people on personality. We don't do personality training. That's like therapy. So we're not talking about KSAP, we're talking about KSA. Next is D&D, design and develop. Then you're going to design using a very SMART, S-M-A-R-T, right? Specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, timely. You're using a SMART method of designing how you're going to deliver your training. Then you will have your budget. You'll estimate a budget and your content. Then I, that's where you would discuss how is this going to be implemented? Is it 1 day? Is it 3 days? Is it a weekend? Is it 3 hours? Is it everybody in one room? Is it small groups? Is it just you, or are there other assistants? How is it done? And then finally, evaluation. How will you tell the company whether it was successful or not? You can't just ask the employees. This is part of it. Asking the employees, did they like it? If I did a training on, theater, and I asked the employees, hey, did you have fun? And they all say yes. That doesn't mean it was an effective training. That just means they had fun. Now, that's part of it, because if they're bored and they hated it, then they're probably not going to learn very much. But that's only part of the evaluation. So these are our 5 elements that I'd like you to do for homework, is figure out what is the training need for a company, then design the program, then develop how you would deliver it, then implement it by talking about your methods, everybody together in separate groups, once for 3 hours, every day, 1 day a month for 3 months. What's your method? And then how would you evaluate whether or not it's effective? Let's talk about step 1, which is the needs analysis. A lot of times management thinks our employees have a problem. Okay, HR, go train them. Our employees are coming late, and this is a real problem. Okay, go train them. Our employees aren't happy. HR, they're not happy. Go train them. HR, our employees keep quitting. We're the Carter Cleaning Company, and they keep quitting. Go train them. And the problem is training doesn't really work like that. Management often blames training and says, oh, the training wasn't good enough. But obviously, managers, if they're not doing their job, that can be the problem. Or if the employees are frustrated because they learn these things, but then they can't do them. If you give an employee some sort of training on time management, and then the manager is telling the employee, you got to do this at this time, and you got to be here at this time, you got to do this at this time, well, then you're not letting the employee use their time management skills that they just learned. So a needs analysis is the first step. Now, the first thing we need to do, absolutely. So I have, I think, 5 questions. Yeah, 5 questions that I would say are part of this first step of ADDIE process, the analyze step. I have 5 questions. So the first question, do you need training? Right? What else besides training could bring about this outcome? So everybody's coming to work late, and management says you need to train them on, time management. Well, the first question is, so this to me is, and I want to be clear about this because this is important to me. to me, this is question 1 for analyze. The first question is, do you need training? Is there any way to do this besides training? Whether it's giving them a motivation. What about just saying to the employees, hey, if you come late 3 times, then you lose 1 day pay. You come late 5 times, you lose 1 week pay. You know, what if we have a problem where the students are coming late to class in CIP? Should we do a training for all students in time management? Maybe, but maybe it would be better. Let me see if it's better here. Is this better? No, now I'm totally in the sun. Maybe it would be better just to have a simple rule that if employees, which we do have, which if students come late to class, then that counts as an absence. You come late 3 times, you were absent. You're absent 5 times, you fail. That's it. So we have a rule. We didn't need training. And that's great, because training is expensive and takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of planning. If we wanted to have a training at CIP for all of the students, then Mei Ling or Yiling or Christine, they'd need to go and find the trainer. They would need to see and analyze, is it worth it? They'd need to have it in the budget to pay the trainer and not use that money for something else. Then they'd need to get classrooms and get all the students. I mean, we're talking about a very expensive and very time-consuming process. So the first question is, can we possibly do this without training? Training is not simple. So that's our first question. Can we fix this problem without training? So I changed this discussion. You know, you're hired at this Chinese real estate company, and their biggest problem is the employees spend all day away from the office, and so the managers don't really know if the employees are out showing apartments or just taking the day off, and they want the employees to receive training. And again, I said you might not need to train them. Maybe you just put a tracking on their phone so you could see where they are. Ask the employees when they show an apartment to take a photograph of it so you could see where they are. That's fine. So the employers need to determine what skills are required. What is, and we use this word, what skills need to be gapped? What's the gap? Gap means space. What's the gap between what the employees know and what they need to know? And then we can start to plan the training. So to find this gap, this space, we use 3 methods. One is organizational, one is task, and one is performance. So for organizational, this gets to our second question. For when we talk about the organization level, question 2 is, that's not pretty, is the training feasible? Feasible means possible. Realistic. No, that's not the number 2. Okay, question 2. Question 2, is the training possible? You know, what if we need to train every student? So the students at Donghua, not CIP, Donghua, all of them, have been coming late to class. And so we want to do a training for 20,000 students. That's just not feasible. We're going to have to find another way, because training for that number of people, it's just not feasible. It's going to cost too much money. It's going to cost too much time. It's going to be a logistical nightmare. So we can't do it. That's the second question. Even if we want to train, is it possible? So to find out if it's possible, we're going to do an organizational needs assessment, where we look at the organization and we say, what resources do they have? First of all, legally, is it possible? Are we allowed to do this? Can we train just the women? Can we train just one ethnic group? Can we train just people who are single and not married? I mean, can we do this stuff? We got to check with that. Do we have the technology to train these people? Do we have enough people to train? Do we have the support from the management to train all these people? Are the employees willing to do it? Do we have the resources, the money, the classrooms, the space, the time? Right? Generally, resources, we're talking about money, space, and time, and people, right? These are our resources. So we're going to look at the organization to decide, is it realistic for us to do this training? Okay, that's the first one. And what we want to know is, do we have the money, the facilities, the rooms, the materials, the expertise Does it match our mission? Do we have a strategic plan? You know, how much will it cost us? Do we have all these things in the organization that allows us to do the training? Can we do it? Okay. The next question, once we've decided question 1, do we really need training? Is there any other way we could do it? Question 2, if we do need training, is it possible? Do we have the resources to do it and the support of everybody? Number 3, so this is to me question 3. Now, okay, so we think training is necessary and we've checked and we do have the resources to do it. Now, what kind of training? That's question number 3. Now, to find out what kind of training, we're going to do what's called a task needs analysis. To figure out, when we say task, we mean the job. So for this job, let's say we're training the advertising department. Well, okay, what needs does the advertising department gap? What needs do they have and what needs do they require? So do they need some additional knowledge to do that job? Do they need some more abilities or skills to do that job? What about intangible qualities? Things like communication, kindness, being responsible, having integrity, being honest. These are all intangible things. Now you could say some things are tangible, like do you know how to use Photoshop? That's tangible. Either you do or you don't, and you can improve. Or do you know how to use our phone system? Or do you know all of our policies about price? Oh, it's so sunny. You know, but then some things are intangible and are more about personality or qualities. We can still do trainings about these. But so the point of this is we do a detailed study of the job, not the person, but the job. Now, you've seen this before, right? What is this called when we do a detailed study of a job? You should all remember this is called a job analysis. So the task needs analysis is very much either the same as or very much like the job analysis. We know what the job of advertising manager requires. So we have this detailed study of the job. We know the KSAPs. We know what's required for this job. So, you know, we might want to break the job into subtasks, right? So to be an advertising manager, you need this, you know, level of communication and this level of using Photoshop and this level of delegating authority and this level of leadership and this level of motivation. We break it into tasks, and you also need to use, you know, the computer. You need this level of typing skills. You need this level, you know, we'll break it into tasks and figure out, okay, so what's the problem here? Are there gaps, spaces, holes in the knowledge that the people in this department have that we can fill? So that's looking at the job. So first, we looked at the entire organization to see, do we have the resources to do the training? Now, if we do, then we narrow and we look, right? We look at the organization, then we narrow and look at the job to see, okay, in this job, what sort of gaps exist between what knowledge the employees have and what they need. And then, so as I said, we're going to use job descriptions, we're going to use job specifications, the whole job analysis. Employers might also do more interviews or observations or whatever, one-on-one interviews, anything like that. Then we get to the next question, question 4. Now we know what we should train. So question 1 was, should we train? Is there any other way we could fix this problem? Question number 2 is, okay, we're going to train, but can we? We think we should, but can we? Do we have the resources? Look at the organization. Question number 3 is, okay, we want to train, we have the resources. Now, what kind of training should it be? Well, now let's look at the job. And so we look at the jobs and do a task needs analysis. Question 4 is, who? We know what we want to train, but who should be trained? And for that, we do an even more narrow and individual needs analysis, also called performance analysis. This shows us information not about the job, but about the people. So we might say, okay, in this advertising department, we think the gap now is in the program Photoshop. We think most of the people here, they're okay at communication, they're okay at data, they're okay at customer satisfaction, but there does seem to be a real problem with Photoshop, so we should do Photoshop training. Now, should we give this Photoshop training to every single person in the advertising department? Well, I mean, that depends how big our company is, but what if we're talking about something like Apple? You know, we're talking about Alibaba or Tencent. You might be talking about 100 people. So the training is going to cost a lot in time, resources, facilities, actual payment for the trainer. So we need to do this individual needs analysis. Not every person needs that training. We need to know which specific employees need this training. So to do this, we can look at reviews of the employees, we can look at disciplinary materials, we could interview people, we could do a focus group, we could give people questionnaires or surveys. There's lots of things we could do to try to determine which people we need to give a training to. Generally, what we're looking for is some kind of performance deficiency, something where there's a gap between what people know and their ability to do the job. Because we need to know, and this is our final question. So this is question 5. Let's say that we look at the advertising department and we've decided, okay, we need to train these 10 people. We look at all the people in the department, 40 people, and we've chosen these 10, they are the ones who have the biggest problem with Photoshop. Now, here's the last question. Do they have a problem because they can't use Photoshop, or because they won't? Is the problem a problem that training will fix for these individuals, or are they just not very motivated for some other reason? And maybe it's not about training for them. Maybe they're unhappy. Maybe they didn't get a promotion. Maybe they're looking for another job. There could be a lot of reasons that actually training isn't going to help these particular individuals. So how do we recognize this? How do we recognize that maybe there should be something else, some other means? Like maybe we should transfer the employee to another department. Maybe we should pay them more. Something like that. The training is not going to fix the problem. How do we know this? Well, we're going to look at their performance. We're going to look at all of their on-the-job data. We'll talk to their supervisors. We might do an interview with them. We might give them a test, like a selection test that we talked about in the last subject. We might give them a survey about their attitudes. We might ask them to keep a diary. These are all these different ways we have, which again, are not different from how we conduct a job analysis. This is all the same, really. We're just talking about asking people questions and doing surveys and things like that. That's all we're really talking about. But that's the kind of stuff we do to find out if training would actually help these employees. Oh, son, you are so bright. Why do you shine in my face? The next steps, design and develop. So when we're talking about designing, so what's the difference between designing and developing? Designing is planning, and developing, let's say designing is building a skeleton, and developing is putting the flesh, the meat on it. So, at the beginning, you just make it's the same as if you're writing an essay. Your design is your outline, and your development is when you add the paragraphs, right? That's when you start to build it. So you want to know, first of all, is this going to be directed or non-directed? So directed teaching is very specific. Here's a new skill, right? So I'm going to teach you to use Photoshop. That is directed. I am going to teach you. Now, take your mouse and do this on Photoshop. Okay, do you see this on the top? Click on that. Now, do you see this? That's directed. I'm directing you in what to do. Now, it could be self-directed, like videos. So if, let's say we did not have a face-to-face class and you just watch these videos, that would be self-directed. You're working at your own speed, and I would just tell you once a week you need to give me a quiz, turn in the quiz so I see how you're doing. So you have a predetermined goal, you have a quiz every week, and you're self-directed, you work, at your own pace. That's kind of the key idea for self-directed. And usually, of course, this is e-learning, right? So you're doing it online, you're doing it at your own pace. Next is information processing. Information processing generally is a lecture. So you might have questions where, just like our lectures, where you say, teacher, I have a question, I didn't understand. What is directed learning, right? That's information processing. I'm still setting the pace. You don't get to decide your own pace. I move at my speed, and you listen, but you can ask questions. And then finally, there's simulation. These are all directed. Simulation is when I put you in a situation and I say, go. So, okay, guys, I'm going to give you a group project. You have 1 week to design a training, and then you are going to train the class. And oh my God, I wish we had the time. I wish this was just a class on training, because that would be so much fun for me to have you guys. Right now, I have you doing a presentation each class. I would love to have you guys do a training. I don't think about that. I wish there was a way. It'd be so interesting. But, that would be a simulation. You're not just giving us a speech. Right now with the PPT, it's information processing. You're giving us a lecture, and we could ask questions before or after. But with training, you'd be putting us into, or with me giving you that assignment, you'd be put into this situation. Or if I say, okay, guys, this week we are going to take a field trip, and we're going to go to an actual office, and you each sit down at a desk, and you have 2 hours to handle this amount of work. That's all, that's very directed. Now, non-directed is more about, I want you to be invested in the organization. This goes back to this idea of engagement. I want you to be engaged. I know, I'm in HR now, and I know that when you come into my company, you're not going to work here for the next 45 years, probably. People don't really do that employment for life thing anymore. I know you're going to leave someday. Should I be sad about that? Should I be angry at you that you're going to leave someday? No. What should I really do? I should help you. I should help you by giving you transferable skills. So this is where I'm saying, let's say you work in advertising and I am offering a training on accounting. Now, that has nothing to do with your job, but you have considered, maybe you don't love advertising and maybe you'd like to try something different. I can offer you training on accounting and you can learn that. Now, if you're going to learn all of these different things from my organization, from the training, you might be more likely to stay with my organization, show more loyalty. If other people say, hey, how is that company that you're working at? You might say, oh, it's great. They give us all kinds of free training. I really enjoy it. I learned about child psychology, and I don't love advertising, but they give us all this training on psychology, and some of it's useful and some of it's just interesting. And I love it. Now I'm thinking of going into a different field and doing adolescent psychology. It increases employee satisfaction. And when employees are satisfied, they're less bored, they're less likely to have negative workplace behaviors, they're less likely to quit the job and have turnover. So again, when we talk about the Carter Cleaning Company, one of the big things that Jack and Jennifer aren't doing is any kind of training that is not just a skill training. They're only training people how to use these pressing machines or how to use the iron. That's it. That's all they're training. They're not training in anything else. And while it might cost them money to do this, there might actually be some employees they have could do the training. Like they have lots of employees who do have different skills. And so some could do trainings. But a non-directed training is what we were talking about, like time management, creativity, spirituality, yoga, psychology, languages. Give training in Spanish, give training in French or in Chinese or whatever. It might have nothing to do with their job, but it would keep the employees satisfied and interested and happy, everything like that. You have to decide when you are designing your training. So we're designing it now. We're going to first need to decide, do we want it to be directed or non-directed? Do I want my training to be about a specific skill, or do I want it to be about something more intangible, like communication or integrity or cultural awareness, things like that? Now we have to decide, do we want it to be face-to-face or e-learning? Both of them are fine, but do we want it to be face-to-face or online is the next thing we need to decide when we are creating our training. But I see we're now at an hour, and I don't like to do a video. We don't have too much left, but we have enough that I'm going to stop the video now and then do a second video for the rest of this.